this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Questions orales, oral questions for the honourable member from Regina Capel.
After 9 years of brutal assaults on Canadian energy workers, the Prime Minister just delivered a knockout punch with a production cap on oil and gas development here, which his own department admits will kill jobs and drive investment south of the border. Canadian energy company Enbridge just announced a $700 million project in the U.S. The Prime Minister is creating powerful paychecks for American workers while Canadian workers can't afford their mortgages or food. It's completely baffling why he would kill jobs here just to see them created down south. Is he getting some kind of a commission from the U.S. energy lobby for all the business he's sending them?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, what the member opposite is saying is simply not true. It's a cap on pollution, Mr. Speaker. In fact, production is going to go up 16% by 2030, and companies in Alberta, in the oil sands sectors, are making $1 billion investment to make sure that workers in Alberta have a future and the energy sector has a future, and we can fight climate change at the same time, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
It's a cap on production, and his own department says it will kill jobs. And let's listen to something else that their own officials are saying. The Prime Minister's own Environment Commissioner has blasted the carbon tax as a failure. Here's some of his conclusions. Quote, the government has not made sufficient progress to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And quote, Canada remains the worst performer among all member countries of the G7. Every time the Prime Minister makes the carbon tax go up, Canada's climate performance goes down. Yep. Yet he keeps doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So why won't he call a carbon tax election so Conservatives can stop his insanity?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party of Canada is talking about climate change. We should note this somewhere in a book because it doesn't happen very often. Wow. If only they would talk about the fact that for 10 years they did nothing, which is why we had to pick up the slack from what when we came into power, emissions were going to overshoot 2030 by more than 30%, Mr. Speaker. Emissions are down by 8% because of our plan, the lowest emissions in 25 years, no thanks to the Conservative Party.
Encourage all members, please, to not take the floor unless they're recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Pick up the slack. Under their policies, Canada keeps falling on performance indexes. The only thing this carbon tax is doing is making Canadians poorer, and the results are devastating. A damning new report from the Salvation Army shows the human suffering this Prime Minister is inflicting on Canadians. Let's look at the report. First-time users of food banks shot up this year from 43% to 58%, and 1 in 4 parents are eating less so their children can eat. This is in Canada. How can he be so cold-hearted? Why won't he at least let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Economic Development in Quebec.
Monsieur le Président, savez-vous qui...
Mr. Speaker, do you know who has an inferiority complex in this place? It's the Conservative Party, because Canada has the lowest inflation. Interest rates are going down. Not only are we helping Canadians in need, we're building housing, we've got the family benefits, and the only ones in this place with an inferiority complex about Canada's economic resiliency is the Conservative Party.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Revelations in court filings show that there's another lawsuit against the Liberal minister from Edmonton showing that he broke the law. This one shows that his shady company and his business partner, well, he's now been directly named in this lawsuit in their search for buyers. Quote, they're going to sell this. I just updated Felix and Randy. And quote, are you confident really? I won't tell Shauna, Felix and Randy yet. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, they're not worth the cost or the corruption. So will the Liberal minister from Edmonton stand up and admit to Canadians that he broke the law?
Yeah. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue has been dealt with by the Ethics Commissioner, who has cleared that member on 3 occasions. When it comes to his former business partner, we agree with this House. He should have been clear and answered those questions, and now he will face those consequences. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Canadians can't believe a word from these Liberals when it comes to this scandal. We know that the cabinet minister was sitting around the table while his company was applying for federal government contracts, and we know that his business lied before a parliamentary committee. But there's more explosive reporting today about the Liberal minister from Edmonton and his company fraudulently applying for government contracts. Now, experts are saying that if this is proven to be true, that the Prime Minister should expel the Minister from Cabinet. Conservatives are saying we should call the cops. So will the Prime Minister fire him today or wait till he's dragged out in handcuffs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is making reference to an article that came out today, and I can assure everyone in this House and those watching that the article confirms that the company in question has never received any contracts as an Indigenous business and has never been listed on the Indigenous Business Directory. And our focus is on building up Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs through procurement. We're not going to let any members across the way try to block the progress to achieving economic reconciliation, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to work with Indigenous partners to reduce the barriers and increase participation in federal procurement.
Order. The honourable member from Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous people are outraged that government contracts meant for Indigenous businesses are being scooped up by shady companies with no Indigenous connection. Today we learned that the Minister of Employment's fraud-ridden company, Global Health Imports, claimed to be Indigenous in order to try and secure millions in lucrative government contracts. Now, this all happened while the Minister of Employment was actively running the company. It's time to end the charade. When will the Minister admit that he is the real Randy and acknowledge that it's wrong to falsely claim Indigenous heritage and take contracts meant for Indigenous peoples and resign?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Procurement Services.
Speaker, we're taking every effort to ensure that Indigenous people are properly associated with the contracts that are procured. That's why we've established the very motion that's going forward. Members opposite want to criticize and be critical of the program, but it's essential to ensure that Indigenous people have the right, have the ability for economic success and integration so that they too can succeed, and that we understand that those on the Indigenous list are managed appropriately, and the procurement process is also taking transparent measures forward.
The honourable member from Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, today it was revealed that a company co-owned by the Employment Minister bid on federal contracts while claiming to be Indigenous owned. The company, Global Health Imports, has 2 shareholders. Perhaps 3 if you count the other Randy. But according to the Assembly of First Nations, the Liberals' Indigenous procurement program is being abused by shell companies, with the vast majority of those federal contracts going to non-Indigenous businesses. Will the Prime Minister listen to those leaders, call an investigation, and remove the Minister from Cabinet until the inquiry is finished?
Hear, hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
The article makes it very clear the association that was being referenced here did not get a contract. They were not listed on the Indigenous list, and we've taken the steps appropriately in the procurement to ensure that that doesn't happen, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Banff-Airdrie.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost of housing, and veterans who fought for our country are feeling the pinch more than anyone. Sadly, veterans are 3 times more likely to become homeless. And a recent study indicates that there's 4 times more homeless veterans than the government claims. As many as 10,000 homeless veterans, in fact. Terrible. That's 10,000 too many. So how can the government who caused the problem and who won't even admit the extent of the problem be trusted to fix the problem.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the cost of sending our citizens to war includes the cost of taking care of them when they come home. That's why we have moved forward with programs that are designed to actually ensure that communities have the capacity to provide housing to those who have put their lives at risk in order to protect our country overseas and at home. Mr. Speaker, I recently was able to work with the Canadian Alliance to end homelessness, to scale up a program that has ended functional homelessness for veterans in 3 communities across this country so they can expand it to 26 additional cities. We've also worked very closely with community organizations across this country, and what's disappointing, Mr. Speaker, when it came time to put your position on the record, the Conservatives voted against these programs.
The Honourable Member for Banff Fairtree.
Well, the number of homeless veterans just keeps going up, so obviously the photo ops and press releases aren't getting the job done, Mr. Speaker. The Veterans Association Food Bank in Calgary reports that in the last 6 months alone, their numbers have tripled in what they're spending to keep veterans housed, clothed, and fed. Veterans served our country, and they deserve better than the homelessness and hunger that they're getting from this NDP Liberal government. Veterans, like all Canadians, can't afford the cost. So when will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so veterans can finally get the respect they deserve?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veterans
We're
Affairs.
not going to take any lessons from the Conservatives. They shut down 9 Veterans Affairs offices. We opened 9, plus another one in my hometown of Surrey Centre. They laid off 1,000 Veterans Affairs officers who are there to help veterans get the services they need. We reinstated those services. We've created services to help those veterans get the needs that they need, and we will continue to do so going forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government,
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's failed gun policies are putting Toronto at risk. This year there have been 126 more shootings in Toronto compared to last year, and Peel Regional Police report seizing 1 illegal firearm every 36 hours. The Liberal MPs who were elected from the Toronto area should be here making noise about these problems, but they're silent. And why are they silent, Mr. Speaker? Because they've decided to back up the Prime Minister's failed policies. When will they stop choosing the Prime Minister over the people?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, our position as a Liberal Party, my position as a Toronto MP is simple. Let's keep the citizens of our cities safe. How do we do that? By ensuring that we have less gun violence on our streets. How do we do that? By shoring up our borders to prevent guns from crossing the border. The specific border services that party cut when they were in power prior to 2015. What we also do is we recognize the important impact on domestic violence that gunfare has. When we keep guns out of the homes in people in cities in Canada, what we're doing is ensuring that domestic violence doesn't have a pernicious impact on women. That's how you keep Canadians safe.
The Honourable Member from Durham.
I want my friends and neighbours in Toronto to take note. This Liberal Justice Minister is looking back at things that happened over 10 years ago while he's been here for 9 years and takes zero responsibility for crime getting worse. Imagine that, getting elected to serve your constituents, sitting here for 9 years and can't take a single bit of responsibility for a problem that he should be trying to fix. Mr. Speaker, it's very, very clear. Crime is worse. The Liberal MPs elected to serve Toronto are failing to do their job. When will they stop choosing the Prime Minister over the people?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our government works very effectively with law enforcement professionals across the country, including the regional police, the Peel Regional Police that my colleague referred to, the City of Toronto, the York Regional Police. We've invested, Mr. Speaker, money that the Conservatives cut in the RCMP and border services to prevent illegal guns from entering the country. And Mr. Speaker, we're very surprised the Conservative Party would turn back gun control legislation designed to protect Canadians by making it legal again to have assault-style firearms on the streets of the country.
The honourable member from Niagara Falls.
Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, corruption, or crime. Since 2015, when they formed government, violent crime has skyrocketed by 50%. And sadly, during their reign of error, they have also allowed an evil monster, Paul Bernardo, to be transferred to a medium security institution. On November 26th, this child rapist and serial killer is scheduled to have a parole hearing. Will this NDP Liberal Prime Minister finally get tough on crime and assure Canadians that Paul Bernardo will remain behind bars where he belongs for the rest of his life?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important for all members in this House not to use the name of some of the most notorious killers in the country to give them the exact publicity that they crave. This particular individual is locked up in a federal prison behind two very high fences with a lot of razor wire. Mr. Speaker, I saw myself the secure federal correctional facility that this particular individual is in. My colleague also knows the parole board is independent and it would be absolutely inappropriate to prejudge their work, but I have confidence that they'll do their work properly for public safety.